I've lived a lot of my life on autopilot, and that it wasn't until I had the breakdown and I was in my mid-30s and I had never stopped to think what really matters to me and what are my core values and what are the things that make me feel whole and content.
Simone Nabholz, welcome. Jo and I are so thrilled to have you here today, and we're looking forward to our conversation with you.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be chatting with you.
As we normally do, Sim, we start with a question, and that is, what's the key challenge or event that you've had in your life, and how is that and why has that been significant?
Around 10 years ago, I suffered from a really debilitating episode of burnout, and I became really unwell. I had to go on stress leave from my dream job, and I was so physically and emotionally burnt out that I fell into a really awful period of depression and anxiety. And really, I think the signs were there for a long time that I needed to slow down and that I needed to change the pace that I was living at. And I'm a very stubborn person. And so it wasn't until my body sort of physically started to shut down that I stopped and paid attention and thought, okay, this is not just this is not something that I can ignore. This is something that I really have to face up to. And it was really painful. It sort of caused this huge existential crisis of if who am I if I'm not my work? And it really forced me to analyze all of the facets of my life and what caused me to get into that situation. And yeah, it was really challenging.
You mentioned that you'd known that you'd been feeling that things were not okay. What were those signs when you got them originally that you chose to ignore? What were the little things that you went, oh no, I'll just let that go?
That's a good question. I found that my resilience was really low. There was a lot of situations that if my cup was full that I could have brushed off, but I feel like my base stress level was so high that it only took very small hiccups or problems throughout my day and I just became really overwhelmed, and like either I would be very quick to get angry or I would cry, or like I was just really emotionally on edge often. I wasn't sleeping really well. I think the big thing really is that there wasn't a lot of joy in my life. And then I felt really guilty. Guilt was a huge one, really, because if you looked at it on paper, I had a beautiful family, amazing supportive parents, a husband who is, my best friend and partner and everything, two healthy little kids. And, so when you look at it on paper, I thought, well, who am I to, you know, be feeling sad and miserable? And so I felt guilty about it as well.
Sim, I wonder if that guilt kept you in that loop for perhaps longer. Do you feel like if that guilt hadn't been there, you would have noticed it a little earlier?
I think so. I think guilt was a huge part of it. And hand in hand with that was being a chronic people pleaser and feeling like my self-worth was really tied to what other people thought of me. And so I was always trying to be the best employee and the best mum at, tuck shop and the best friend. I was so focused on that people like me, but really to the detriment of my own mental health. And of course, you can't do all of those things. No one can. We're not robots. So I wasn't doing any of them particularly well. When I was at work, I just felt like I was letting my kids down. And when I was at home with the kids, I felt like I was letting the team down at work. It was really, really difficult to juggle all the different facets. And then, of course, personally, I need to have a lot of creative fulfillment. And so every spare moment I got, I was trying to do a sewing project or trying to learn photography. And so it just was all too much.
Sim, that you mentioned that sort of with that crisis came this question, if I'm not my work, who am I?
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit more about what was going on for you there. You know, what parts of you were so tied up in that role, and how did you navigate that?
Yeah, I think like a huge part of my identity and my ego really was that I identify myself as a designer. So I remember in year 7, we had to write an essay of what do you want to be when you grow up? And back then I wrote, I want to be a graphic designer. I don't think I even really knew what it was. And so I had this very clear path from school to uni to working. And that's what I did. And I really loved it. And then when I had the episode of burnout, the thought of even turning on my computer just made me feel physically ill. And I thought, I can't do this anymore. But then I thought, but what will I do? It was all I ever wanted to do. And I really did like it. And so that was such a crisis for me. I thought, well, that's such a huge part of who I am. Who will I be without this?
Sim, do you think that contributed to your decision to not notice some of those times where you were getting a message that this was too much and that you needed to change things?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think I kept myself so busy so that I didn't have to face what was going on with me. I just distracted myself to the point of making myself sick, really.
So, Sim, I'm really interested to delve a little bit into that sense of the lack of joy that you were experiencing. How did that parallel along the way, along that journey?
Something that became really acute for me is that my days were so full. Just every inch of my day was scheduled or planned. And then I would hit my pillow exhausted and then wake up in the morning and just feel completely empty. Even though my day was so full, I felt empty. Something that I really noticed was that because my kids were really little then, which I mean, and I also had massive sleep deprivation because my little one just would not sleep. Hmm. And I noticed that times when I should have just been able to be present with my kids. They were 2 and 4, I think. And I was just so in my own head. And I knew, I was like, I should be able to just enjoy sitting here on the grass and not be thinking about the million things that are on my to-do list. It was really difficult for me to be present with my kids. And that was hard. And I think that was something that really contributed to me feeling like I needed to do something different.
So that piece around joy, was it more, Sim, that you were recognizing you were unable to enjoy the moments of joy that were present? Did you actively seek other moments of joy? Or how did joy play out in those moments?
If you're in tune with it, you can find joy throughout even the most ordinary days. But that's something that I've really come to learn. But then I never stopped. I never paused long enough to notice all of the joy around me and all the beauty around me. And I didn't slow down enough to notice it. So of course it was there. I just wasn't able to tune into it.
Sim, it sounds like to me that you were ahead of yourself the whole time. You're thinking about what's the next, what thing I need to do to get through the day. I'm interested to know more about how did that feel for you, or was that a feeling that you had? And did that constantly take you away from feeling like you were in the present?
Yeah, I think so. I was always thinking about what was next and ticking boxes and not the right boxes. I was ticking all these boxes. I think something that I realized in hindsight is that I've lived a lot of my life on autopilot, and that it wasn't until I had the breakdown, and I think I was in my mid-30s, I realized that I had never stopped to think, what really matters to me and what are my core values and what are the things that make me feel whole and content. And I had always just done all of the things that I thought I should do. I had a beautiful family, and not that I didn't like the place that I was in. Like when you get in the car and you drive to the same place every day and you can go 15 minutes and you don't remember the journey at all, and you arrive at work or at home and you're like, I don't remember any of that. It was a little bit like that. And I thought I need to really think about what my values are so that I'm not so distracted by all of the other things that are telling me I'm important. Pay attention to me. This is what you should be doing. I just really needed to focus on, okay, well, what are my values and how can I live more aligned to that?
So when you got to that point, was that at the point of the breakdown, Sim, or did you start to think about that before that point?
No, that was after. The breakdown was the catalyst for that. And then all of those thoughts came afterwards.
Just before leading up to the breakdown, Sim, there's this guilt, there's this pleasing others, there's this never pausing to reflect on what are my values and what's important to me and not able to be so present. Were there any fears that were playing into this as well, as if this was like a big pot contributing to your breakdown moment?
Yeah, lots. When it came to my work, I was afraid that, I mean, a lot of it comes back to that people pleasing. I was afraid that people would think poorly of me, that they would think that I wasn't doing the best that I could be doing. I think fundamentally, so much of it was the fear that I wasn't enough in lots of different scenarios in my life. I just had this feeling what I was doing wasn't enough and you know my effort wasn't enough, that I wasn't good enough. I wasn't being a good enough mum, and I wasn't being good enough at work, and I wasn't being good enough as a partner, and that kind of fear was always present for me.
Mm.
Mm.
And do you sense that it was by whose expectations? Was it very strongly internally driven, or do you
Mhm.
sense it was more externally driven, this bar of what good enough looks like?
I think it was all me. My parents have always been super supportive of me and have never put any pressure on me to choose any particular path. It was just all me. Yeah.
How much of your belief systems that you created when you were young do you think you took into that whole sense of I've got to be everything to everyone?
That's a good question. When I think back to my childhood, there was definitely that feeling of wanting to be liked, and I was always super shy and really introverted. And I grew up in a very, very remote place in the Northern Territory. So I had so much time to myself. I spent a lot of time in my own imaginary world.
Mm.
I was physically, geographically very isolated. And then I went to boarding school. I actually think that I've missed out on a lot of the fundamental social and emotional learning in those critical years of between and 14. And also I've discovered only in the last few years that I'm neurodivergent. And so social anxiety is something that's not uncommon with people who have ADHD. And so I think all of these things have definitely contributed to that. Like, I feel like I'm probably the most happy if I'm just on my own in my own little world without all the expectations of other people around me. But that's not how the real world is. And then as soon as I had kids was a massive turning point for me. I think I always felt like a bit of an alien in social situations, in workplaces. I don't know if that's just me feeling self-conscious. Don't know.
Yeah, so it's interesting to, whether that part of social anxiety or uncomfortable in social situations. I wonder how much of that is inner voice or inner critic of yours saying, am I good enough to be,
Mhm.
in this social situation?
I'm so much kinder to myself now. I was like, I think we're all our worst critics, but I would go to something really benign like to work, drinks. And then I would spend like the whole night laying awake, like, did I say something stupid? Are they like, do people think I'm an idiot? Oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. And it was, no one was thinking that at all. No one, like, but I was just tormenting myself. What does everybody think about me? But of course, no one cared. Mm-hmm.
Mm. Sim, I'm interested to move you forward. So there was a bit of a conscious choice not to recognise the symptoms before they got too bad because of all of what you spoke about, because there was that feeling of I'm not good enough and I should be able to do this, and that pressure of just having to get through life every day.
Mm-hmm.
And when you hit that point of going, I can't turn on my computer, tell us about that time and exactly what happened for you.
So I'd left work on a Friday and it was pretty normal. And then I was driving to work on Monday. It's only a short drive, 15 minutes. And I got halfway there and I started to cry. I actually had to pull over because I was so hysterical. I couldn't keep driving. And it was like these floodgates opened and I just had this huge emotional release just by coincidence. One of my very dear friends lived between my house and work. And so instead of going to work, I just went straight to her house and fell on her couch and just lost it. I was completely hysterical and she was really frightened, but she was also really amazing. From that first sitting on her couch and she was, Sim, it's not worth it. You need to leave your job and you need to give yourself a rest. I was, no, I'm not leaving my job. I'll just call in sick. So then 3 or 4 days later, I got worse and worse. I couldn't get out of bed to take the kids to kindy. And I was in bed for a week. And I'm not someone who's very good at being idle. I'm not someone who ever sits still. And so that I was in bed for a week, that was really scary for me. And then also for my husband, he was really frightened too. And that sort of went on for about 3 weeks. And then I thought, I have to go talk to someone. So I went to my GP and got a mental health plan and then tried to figure out a way out of it. And everybody was trying to give me lots of very well-meaning advice, like you should meditate, you should do yoga. But I felt like I was drowning and people were offering me swimming lessons. I remember I went and I saw one psychologist who was lovely and at another point probably would have been great. But I remember she said, okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to create a mood board. And that's what I do at work. That's why I'm here. I don't want to do that. And then I found like I had to really go back to these like super, super basic fundamental things. So I had to strip away absolutely everything. I couldn't see anyone. I couldn't have coffee with my friends. I couldn't do anything. And so I would drive my kids to school and then I would drive to the beach and then I would just sit in the ocean water for as long as I could. That was all I could manage. I just needed to have that connection to nature, I think.
And what did that actually give you?
I needed to feel grounded and I needed to feel something much bigger than myself. And the ocean, it's one of those things where it just makes you realize that you're so small and there's this huge like vastness around you. And I needed that. And obviously the salt water was really healing, but I think I just needed that sensory feeling of floating and calmness and also anything that could like make me feel present was really good. My mother-in-law suggested, I think you should go to a pottery class because she used to do pottery in the 70s. I think it will really help you. So I dragged myself to pottery class and then spent most of the class crying. But yeah, when I started to get my hands in the clay, it had that same effect as the ocean. Like it just made me feel really grounded and present.
So talk us through that, Sim. So to take you back a tiny bit, you said to strip back everything and just get down to basics and just that contact with the ocean and grounding yourself. Was that you giving yourself permission to do that, or was that someone guiding you to saying, Sim, you need to get back to basics? How did you come to that realization?
That was me. It was just like a calling I had really to like get into the water and I don't like people telling me what to do. And so my poor suffering husband, he gives me the best advice and I don't listen. And then someone else will say it and I'll be like, oh, that's a good idea. I just hate being told what to do. And so I'll actively avoid things if people tell me I should be doing it. But yes, I just remember I just drove to the ocean and it was cold. It was like July. It was freezing. And I think that was part of it too, like thermal shock. It was probably also because I felt so numb, and that made me feel something, that freezing cold water.
So I'm hearing
So,
that what you're saying is it was almost like an intuitive sense that that's
mhm.
what you needed to do at that time.
Yeah, it was. It was. It was really like my internal voice, which I hadn't listened to much at all. But that was the first time where I really listened to my inner voice. It was just saying, you need to get into the water.
What a gift that gave you, Simone,
Mm,
at that time, because it did everything that you were talking about that you didn't have. It grounded you. It gave you time out. You had to be in the moment because it was so damn cold. You couldn't have avoided that. So it actually gave you everything that you probably needed that you didn't even really know that you needed as much as you did.
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So now I'd like to know, where did you go from there? Your realization was that obviously you just could not do this anymore and you
Hmm.
needed just to ground yourself. How long did that stay for you, and what was your next step from there?
Everyone was telling me, you need to leave your job, you need to stop working. And I was like, are you going to pay my mortgage? No. And I was still being very like, no. But then eventually I did. I think it was about 2 months after that day when I was crying on my friend's couch where I stopped work. But then this whole other wave of fear came in. I just quit my job and I've got 2 kids and a mortgage. And what am I going to do? So going into the ocean and then my Thursday pottery class, they were the things that were getting me out of bed. And so I kept doing this pottery class, and everyone had been talking to me about mindfulness and meditation and yoga. And I got the theories, and I'd been to yoga classes, but I remember right at the end when everybody's laying with their eyes closed and relaxing, that's when my brain's got a million thoughts. And I was like, I don't really get this whole mindfulness yoga stuff that everyone loves so much. And then when I started doing the pottery classes, I was, oh, okay, I get it. I was so present and so focused. And for 20 minutes, I was playing with the clay and I didn't think about a single other thing. I'd never experienced that before. I'm always so much in my head. And to have quiet in my head and to have all of the noise, the volume turned down on all of the noise in my head, that was life changing for me. And so at that point, I was thinking, I'm just going to do more of the things that make me feel a little bit better. And it was that simple. So I thought doing pottery makes me feel a little bit better. And then it was digging myself out of a hole, and I'd fall back in all the time and then try and dig myself out again. So it wasn't this amazing linear path. It was very up and down. And yes, I really focused. It also did give me that creative fulfillment, which is, I've realized, is really important for me. I realized through this whole process, one of the biggest things that I've had to learn is to say no, because I was saying yes to absolutely everything, which was one of the reasons why I burnt out. It was really hard for me. Saying no, it did not come easy for me. But in that process of that few months, um, because I had to, because I just was physically not well enough, I had to say no to so many things. And that was a huge shift for me.
What then changed in you being forced to say no?
Emotionally, I always thought that if I say no to things, people would judge me or people would think that I'm selfish. I thought, oh, it's selfish to say no. Quite an empath. And so if I see that someone needs something, then I do really want to be able to help them, whether it's like moving house or babysitting their kids or, whatever it is. I kind of be able to do all the things for everyone, but it wasn't sustainable at all for me. People are just going to think I'm awful if I say no to things. But actually, the opposite was true. I was so surprised by setting personal boundaries for myself. People respected me more. I wasn't expecting that would be the case. And so by learning to set boundaries for my time and myself, my relationships actually became better and healthier. As I went on, something that I was able to do was think about, well, what's the trade-off? Like, if I say yes to this thing that I don't particularly want to do, but I feel obliged to, like if I say yes to spending 3 hours, doing after work drinks, which I don't really want to do, then I'm saying no to having a movie night with my kids. Is that trade-off worth it? No, it's not. And I reframed everything. So before I said yes to something, I would think to myself, so what are you saying no to? Is it worth it?
I love
Point.
that.
Yeah, that really helped me a lot with trying to define my personal boundaries.
It's also building into your self-worth and that, am I good enough? So here was this fear that's driven a lot of your behavior, which is, I won't be good enough if I say no to someone, or whether that's through good enough in your eyes or good enough in their eyes, or maybe both. To then realizing that, facing that fear because you had to, and saying no meant, well, not only did it mean that people, in fact, it raised your worth in other people's eyes, but in some way it also raised your self-worth. You began to value your own self, having to say no and facing that fear.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's true, that I definitely started to change my feeling around not being good enough. That also gradually shifted over time, that I started to feel, yeah, I am doing my best and I am good enough. And the self-worth, I think, was part of that.
Sounds to me, Simone, first time in a long time, you were living your authentic self. So you were checking, you were working from the inside rather than working from the outside. Not letting external people, factors, situations influence what was best for you.
Yes, definitely. And I went through a process of really trying to define what my values are. And that was so helpful to give me a compass for how to make decisions. I get so much decision paralysis and decision fatigue, and not knowing which direction to take with lots of different situations. And I went through this process and I realized that my values are beauty, not like fashion magazines, but more like the inherent beauty that we have all around us in the objects that we use. Really simple things like just having a bunch of fresh flowers on the kitchen bench. And tied in with that is things like integrity, I think, is one of my values. And so that means thinking about how things are made and the people behind all of the things that we use. We're all massive consumers. I started to really think about the integrity behind all of those interactions that we have throughout the day with things we're buying and people we're spending time with. And then when I was able to define that, that helped me so much to be able to basically cut out all of the non-essential stuff that I was just wasting all of my time with. I had to slow down enough to figure out what mattered to me. And before I had the breakdown, because that was impossible, I was going at such a rapid pace and I really had to give myself permission to slow down. That wasn't easy to do.
What a statement you've just made there, Simone. You had to slow down enough to know what mattered to you, for you to have even that realization, to get to that point, to even say that to yourself. That's such a moment.
Yeah, it was. It was really a life-changing realization for me. And then I was able to start living intentionally rather than on autopilot, just being a lot more present and aware of how I was living my days. And instead of, as you were saying before, that I was so focused on the future and what's next, I was able to live in the moment and notice what's right in front of me rather than just like whizzing past it and going to the next thing so quickly.
It's a big thing for someone to really land on what are my deep core values, and being able to, at this turning point, you're now being guided by these very clear values. But how did you get to that place where you knew that they were your values? Was that some external help you got, or how did you get
It
that process?
it was. I tried to figure it out on my own, but I found it really difficult. So I did go to a coach who helped me to define my values. So we went through a whole process where she helped me to figure out what those things are. And that was really valuable for me to have her insight.
And so once you began living more in line with your values, tell us what's and then from those sort of pottery classes and being in the ocean regularly. Yeah, how did the next phase unfold for you?
I decided all of that energy that I had been putting into my old work, I started putting that energy into ceramics and pottery. And when I set my mind to something, there's nothing is going to get in my way. I mean, at the time, I wouldn't wish it on anyone. It was a horrendous experience to have such terrible anxiety and depression. But I think if I hadn't hit rock bottom, then I wouldn't have started a pottery studio because it seems kind of crazy. But I felt like I had nothing to lose. So I thought, I've got nothing to lose. I'm going to give this a go. And all of my friends and family, like, they were all trying to talk me out of it. Oh my gosh. But that just put more of a fire in my belly, I think. And so I spent a lot of time making ceramics for myself. I really wanted to feel grounded. And so I made like a bowl. There was a bowl that I was looking to buy and I couldn't find it anywhere. And I just wanted this beautiful organic bowl that when I held it in my hands, made me feel really nourished and then have just like really simple, beautiful, wholesome food because I was really stripping back to basics. And so I made myself that bowl and then I got lucky, I suppose. And a friend of mine saw me, I think I put it on Facebook or something. And he was like, "Oh, I'm opening a restaurant. Can you make me 300 of those?"
Oh,
And
that's
I
no
was
mean
like,
feat.
yeah. And I had no idea what I was doing. I was 6 weeks into my pottery class. I hadn't even wired a single thing. This was just raw clay shape. I was like, oh, I can do that. My husband was like, "What is wrong with you? Like, did you learn nothing from the last 3 months?" But thankfully for me, he was quite naive about the process of opening a restaurant as I was starting pottery. So it took him about 2 years to open his restaurant, which is good for me because it took me about 2 years to figure out how to make 300 bowls. So that worked out quite well. But yes, that project prompted me to get a real pottery studio and then it went from there. But through that entire process of creating Winterwares, which is the name of my pottery studio, is that I was able to practice all of those new things that I was discovering about how to live more aligned with my values and what mattered to me and how to have the right priorities. So really in those early years, my business completely was built to support my mental health. So I needed a space that was really calm and like a sanctuary away from the chaos outside. And I needed to create beautiful, honest, useful products. Didn't want to just contribute to all the noise outside. So I did all of that because that's what I really needed. And then I think fortunately it resonated with a lot of other people and I was able to continue with it.
So where are you now? It sounds as though you've got a great business in Winterwares. And how are you emotionally and how are you physically?
Everything's so much better. It's so good. I mean, obviously still have some ups and downs. Like I have so many more resources and my resilience is so much better. And I think part of my journey with Winterwares and slow living has been learning to fill my cup, sort of to build my resilience so that because of course tough times are always going to come at us, always. And I've had some really tough times in the last couple of years. My resilience is so much better now. It's nothing super unattainable. For me, it's just small things, making sure that I ground myself. So I still swim in the ocean every day now and I make sure that I have swapped out my generic mug for a handmade one. And I know I'm biased, but having a cup of tea from a handmade mug nurtures your soul a little bit. And so I swapped out all of these small things And they seem so tiny, but all of those little things add up so that at the end of the day, you just feel so much more nurtured than if you hadn't done all those little things.
Sounds to me, Simone, you really are living your life from the inside out. So you're checking in with you. What do you need? Who do you need to be? What's your internal chatter? And instead of living from, external things, and that's going to drive me what I do.
Yeah, and it's still definitely a work in progress. There's still a lot of things that I think I could do better. I think I'll always feel like that. I definitely feel like I'm living my life intentionally now. Like I'm doing the things that really matter to me, and that feels really good.
We talked about being a graphic design, which is a job that you really always wanted to do, and that was what, in some ways, contributed to the burnout. And I imagine running a pottery studio, I don't know a lot about your business, but I imagine that would be fairly full on too. And I gather you still make product for other people as well. Is that right? That would be fairly full on. So you haven't swapped the busyness in some way.
Right.
Why does this make what you're doing so right? And apart from the resilience, what gives you all of that capacity to do now that you didn't have before?
Yeah, I think that sense of like internal fulfillment that I get from doing the work that I'm doing that I love, like thing that I realized with my graphic design work is that our creative sort of work, it's not 9 to 5. You can't just show up at 9, come up with some inspirational idea, create the thing and then leave. You have to be constantly problem solving and thinking all the time. So in the shower, when you're walking at the beach, you're always thinking about things. And I found that I would put in like 110% for a client project. That's all I would think about. And then as soon as the project was done, I didn't think about it at all. There was no long term, like just it didn't matter. And I thought, if I'm going to lay awake at night, which I did a lot, at least I should do it for something that's important to me. And I started a business and I wasn't laying awake at night as much as I used to anyway, which was amazing. I mean, there's definitely been times where I have, but compared to what I was before, I'm just so much more in tune with what I'm doing that it doesn't feel like such a hustle and it doesn't feel so taxing on me. I had to really reframe my mindset. I had to redefine success at the beginning because, of course, when I first started, I took a massive hit to what I was earning because I was just starting a business. And I had to redefine that success wasn't how much money I was taking home each week, but success was the impact that I was having on people and success was my mental health and my well-being and that was in such a better place. And now 10 years on, I don't make any of the pottery anymore. I have an amazing team. And so I have lots of help now. And like I've kind of come full circle. So my main role really is to do the design and the branding and the styling and all that stuff that I loved doing 10 years ago.
Where do you find your joy now, Sim?
So it's with my family, my husband and my kids are my favorite people in the world. And every morning, my husband and I get up, and we go for a swim at the beach, and then we go have coffee, and that's amazing. I'm so content with a cup of tea in the garden with my cats, and I do love the feeling of personal growth and learning things. Like I love learning, so I'm an avid reader and like sometimes I panic. There's not enough time in this lifetime to read all the books that I want to read and listen to all the conversations and podcasts. I mean, I sometimes I panic about that because I think there's just so much good stuff that we can experience. Like it's my birthday coming up soon and at first I was thinking, oh, I should go traveling or book something and then actually I'm going to have my perfect day in Fremantle, which is my entire world is Fremantle. And so I'm here every day, but I thought I'm going to go for a swim at the beach and then I'm going to have a coffee and then I'm going to go to one of the bookshops and get a book. and then I'm going to go to the deli and grab some stuff, and I'm going to sit in the park and read the book, and then I'm going to catch up with one of my friends. And it's just all these like tiny, small things, and that is going to be my perfect day.
Sounds pretty good to me, Sim.
Yeah.
So, Sim, knowing what you know now and all the journey that this experience has, all the places this journey has taken you, what messages would you give your 10-year-old self?
That's such a great question. My 10-year-old self. I would say to my 10-year-old self that everyone doesn't have to like you. It's not super important. You're allowed to say no. Don't be worried that by saying no that people won't like you. And I think I would say to my 10-year-old self to really listen to that voice inside you, because she knows what's best for you, and she can guide you if you can just really tune in and listen to what she has to say.
Wow, that's beautiful messages. You've already touched on this slightly, but again, where this journey has taken you, what's the greatest gift that this experience has given you?
I think it's being able to find joy in the everyday moments. It's really given me access to be able to find the beauty in ordinary things, and that's been really amazing for me. And I think giving myself permission to slow down, that's been really life-changing for me too.
You can hear that in your story and the journey and where you are now. You can see that gift has unfolded, which is wonderful. So just to wrap up, Sim, what would be your top 3 tips for others?
I would say definitely learn to say no gracefully. And I think start your day with something that fills your cup, even if it's just 10 minutes. Read a chapter of a book, or go for a walk, or just sit and have your cup of tea and don't look at your phone. I'm so guilty of looking at my phone too much, like everyone. But when I do just sit and have 10 minutes to myself, it makes such a difference. So I would say give yourself time to do the things that fill your cup. And then would my other tip be? This would be a big one, but figure out what matters to you so that it becomes so much easier to say no to all of the things that are trying to take your attention.
Sim, it has been an absolute pleasure listening to you, and you are living and breathing those top tips and the greatest gift and the lessons. So thank you so much for spending this time with us, Sim.
Thank you. I really enjoyed chatting with you both.
Okay, that's our episode for today of What's Fear Got to Do with It. Thanks so much for your company. We hope you found it insightful and it left you with some helpful tips from our guests and some great points for you to reflect on. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Substack or follow us on your favourite platform and leave a review. We'd love to know your thoughts. Maybe you'd like to be a guest, or you know someone who you would like to hear their story. Reach out to us on Insta at whatsfear_podcast, or email us at info@whatsfear.com. All the guests' show notes are below. Until next time, from Jo and I, take care, stay curious, and keep the conversation going.